Injuries are a part of sport, a fact of life for every athlete, male or female. They're an occupational hazard. Yet, often the tone and nature of the discussion around injured athletes can be very different, depending on whether they are a man or a woman. When male athletes are injured, the narrative is typically centred around how long they'll be out of action. For women, it can be a different story, because while that plays in, it's often more about the prevalence of that particular injury in comparison to the men and the anatomical differences that made that injury more likely to happen in the first place. There is something else, though, which tends to fly under the radar: the system within which our female sportspeople are playing in a structure that was designed for their male counterparts. Could some part of the reason behind their increased susceptibility to certain injuries lie within the environment and conditions under which they're playing, rather than their actual biological makeup? In plain terms, could a major element in all of this be a case of nature versus nurture? While research continues to develop in the area, it's probably best to take note of the modifiable components of that jigsaw puzzle, as explained by Dr. Siobhan O'Connor, an Associate Professor in the School of Health and Human Performance in Dublin City University.
I do think there's some organisational system issues there at play that can be forgotten about when you just look at anatomical differences that are actually something that could really make a difference. A big focus of mine and something I'm very passionate about is actually the lack of medical professionals, healthcare professionals like certified therapists, physiotherapists, doctors working with women's sports, S&C, strength and conditioning support as well, and just access and implementation of injury prevention programs too. And as well, you also have the big factor as well of funding. So we do know that women's sport has less funding than men's sport. So therefore that impacts facilities and opportunities for training and the supports I've mentioned previously. So it's a multifaceted issue, really. It's not just one thing, but I really think there should be a real huge focus on how we can enhance the funding and also enhance the training of women to help reduce these injuries.
When people think of injuries specifically related to women's sport, the big one that comes to mind is the ACL. Specifically, the ACL refers to the anterior cruciate ligament, but now it has almost become a byword for a bad knee injury that results in a longer than average spell on the sidelines. While it has been proven that women sustain ACL injuries at higher rates than men in particular sports, the exact figure varies. Football studies have found that they can be up to 2.8 times more likely, in basketball up to 3.5 times more likely, and so on. In Ireland then, we see the effect it can have on our Gaelic Games athletes as well. Some players have been particularly affected, such as Kilkenny Camogie vice-captain for 2025, Kellyanne Doyle. The Piltown Camogie clubwoman has picked up the injury as many times as she has tasted All-Ireland glory and lifted the O'Duffy Cup, on 3 separate occasions. And she's certainly felt the stress it can place on a person, from the physical toll and the isolation of completing rehab programs in the gym to the practical effects it can have on your day job. The recovery can be an all-consuming process. There is one area that really stands out to her.
I think the mental side is it's nearly just as difficult, if not more difficult, than the physical recovery. You take the little wins when you can. In that process, the whole recovery stage, you just have to take it day by day. Like the emotional side of things, it can be very draining, and there can be a lot to it as well. But no, it's usually all worth it in the end.
Dr. Siobhan O'Connor says greater awareness and education around injury prevention programs are a big factor as well. In the example of ACLs, she talks about how programs like that can reduce the risk of that injury in female athletes by up to 52%, and so it's vital that they are implemented.
So I think one of the main simple things that we could do is start embedding injury prevention programs into our training. And one interesting study we're looking at the moment is in collaboration with the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, and John Corrigan is a PhD student of mine working on this, is we're designing an injury prevention program that was co-designed by players and coaches and also a group of international experts all across the world in injury prevention and coaching. And we basically listened to what they said. So there are injury prevention programs out there, but they're not being done. So we have to ask why. There's no point providing them with the same thing if it's not happening. So we basically, using their feedback, which was they wanted more ball work, more team activities, more sports specific elements to the program as well, and actually replicating the sport that they're going to be playing. And we've designed that, and we're really excited about it. It's not an extra add-on. It's basically something that's going to be embedded within the actual training itself, not as solely as a warm-up, but actually throughout the training. And we're really excited about it. And we're actually trialling at the moment. So it's being rolled out to a number of clubs across Dublin to examine its effectiveness. So we're really looking forward to getting that message out there.
That's a thought many experts within the industry would concur with. And it's not just limited to ACL and lower limb injuries, but to others too. Former Ireland Rugby International turned postdoctoral researcher Catherine Dane, for example, was so interested in this specific area when it came to concussions and tackle safety that she pursued a PhD on the topic in Trinity College Dublin. She found that incidents within tackles could account for up to 67% of all match injuries within rugby, with some of her interviewees even having reported that they had never tackled or made a tackle prior to their first game of rugby. She has since made the move to the Sports Injury Prevention Research Centre in the University of Calgary in Canada to further her studies in this area, and is passionate about translating those findings into actionable measures on the field of play.
I started playing rugby with the boys back at under 8s level in Enniscorthy Rugby Club. I've been playing all the way through. Took a little detour into international soccer for a little bit, and then back to rugby, my first love. And I then started working as a physio within rugby, and I really noticed the kind of disconnect between the evidence that was there to inform best practice in terms of both sports medicine care and coaching, and then the actual care that we were seeing on the pitches. And so I thought, oh, why don't I use my physiotherapy and rugby playing and coaching hats to do a PhD and study tackle safety in women's rugby. So from there, I used qualitative interviews with players, as well as surveys with coaches and video analysis of kind of match play in the elite women's game to get a better understanding of tackle safety in the area. And yeah, the conclusion was that there's very little research out there, that there are definitely disconnects between the coaches' intentions and best practices, as well as it really unearthed the kind of systemic resource inequities that women face in their journey in rugby, from both tackle skill development as well as injury prevention, management and rehabilitation. So it really unearthed that kind of like gendered environmental factors that come into play.
Her latest project has seen her engage with youth girl teams in Canada, their players and coaches, to ensure they can deliver tackle training workshops in a bid to ensure safety for players. The hope is that they will go on to reduce incidences of concussion and other injuries, equipping athletes with the right tools to encourage them to be contact confident.
We know that the burden and risk of injury is higher in youth girls rugby, for example, and the rates of concussions are, I think, maybe 1.5 times the rates of concussions for the boys' game. Now that could be a sex reason, but it also could be a gendered reason, in that we, as a society, have been socialized to put girls into certain sports and not have them rough and tumble, and we don't give them access to the free play that perhaps boys have access to from a young age. We also aren't very encouraging of them for going to the gym and getting strong and building themselves up like we do for boys and men. So there's a number of other gendered kind of environmental factors as well that play a part in that. But anecdotally, from my experience in rugby, things are definitely improving, and we now have girls only teams, and we have performance pathways for them to get access to gender specific care and skill development.
Coming from the athlete's point of view as well, Doyle believes continued developments like that within the area and specific strength and conditioning rehabilitation measures would certainly be positive for the game.
Yeah, I suppose like you hear a lot of things when you do it about the research, and if it's down to the boots that females wear, and kind of like what you touched on, the body composition of males versus females, and pitches, or the time of the month for females as well seems to have a factor as well. But there's probably not enough research on any of the factors yet to kind of determine a root cause. But yeah, if there could be more research done in preventing, and then everyone's strength and conditioning modified to prevent those, I think it would be beneficial.
As Dane outlines, the best injury is the one that never happens. And so should trials like the one Dr. O'Connor mentions prove to be successful, they could go a long way to significantly reducing injuries within the women's game, while the research catches up. With that in mind, Dane, who has 23 caps for Ireland, emphasises how it's so important to ensure the athlete's voice continues to be heard.
I am also, like, outside of rugby, I'm a huge advocate for the athlete voice in research. We have been guilty of not including the end users, the athletes, the coaches, the healthcare professionals in our research endeavours, and I'm very keen on using qualitative methods to make sure that the voice of the people who are going to be using these things is getting heard and that their preferences are being met. I've been, as a player, on the receiving end of multiple injuries across my career, some more severe than others, and it really does bring in that element of shared decision making into the process, and as athletes in the elite game, sometimes we're viewed as commodities, and I think we have to really move away from that, and what we could be guilty of is trying to adopt the male models of performance, or those androcentric norms about sport, of being brave and fearless, and trying to copy and paste that and hope that it sticks and applies for the girls and women's game. And I think that my research is hopefully starting to peel away the surface of that, and hopefully disprove some of those notions that we should be following the exact same footsteps. I think we can carve our own path for injury prevention and skill development in the girls and women's game, and I think we can only do that by making sure that their voices are being heard.
It's time this problem is tackled head on, and that female athletes were no longer injured by the system, which, up until this point, has been largely built around the structures set up by men for men. This video is part of the Same But Different series, looking at what sets women's sport apart. For more, you can follow the series on the Irish Independent.